Now, let's talk about the G20 Leader Summit holding for the first time in India. The executive roundtable is expected to be attended by leading industrialists in Indian private sector, Nigerian industrialists, as well as senior government officials from both countries. At the G20 Summit, President Tinubu will share the country's perspective on the theme One Earth, One Family, One Future, with focus on global unity required to address the challenges facing humanity and the planet. Nigeria's membership of G20, we're told, is also desirable, and the government has embarked on wide-range consultations with a view to ascertaining the benefits and risks of membership. For more on this development, investment banker and economist, CEO, the CFG Advisory, Tilewa Adebajo, joins me now on the program. Thank you for joining us on First 100 Days. We understand there are indications Nigeria wants to join.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good
Your
afternoon.
audio is a bit low.
Okay, I'm hoping that you can hear me. I just mentioned that there are indications Nigeria wants to join the G20 and that the federal government has now embarked on some form of consultations to understand the benefits and risks of membership. What do you make of this move?
Well, to be a member of the G20, you need to be one of the top 20 economies of the world. And in order for us to achieve that, our GDP has to, be in the top 20. It's not there right now. So the best we can hope for now is to get invitations to the summit to meet world leaders. So G20 means that those are the top 20 economies of the world. And that goes by GDP. And that's how you make that place. Nigeria is currently in the just under 30s, in the low 30s in terms of the top economies of the world, and is still the largest economy in Africa.
So there's another window on the agenda this year is a possible inclusion of the African Union and also giving it some voting rights. We understand that the G20 already supports this proposal and that a decision is pending in that regard. Talk to us about the importance of economic cooperation at such level, particularly with Africa.
Well, definitely, of course, Africa is an important trading partner to the global economy. More than half of the world's resources are coming from Africa to support those global economies. So the top economies of the world depend on Africa to get their resources to support those economies. So African economies as a whole are very important. And at every G20 summit, there is an invitation for some African leaders at any point in time to dialogue. And I think it's rotated. And of course, Africa is always at the table under the auspices of the African Union.
The Tinubu administration has been talking a lot about foreign direct investment and the need for revenue outside borrowing, given how much we've borrowed in the past. The president is attending the two-day summit on the special invitation of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What kind of future do you think exists or do you foresee between the two nations in this regard?
Well, first of all, I think it's important for us to understand that India is one of our top trading partners. India is the largest buyer of Nigerian crude oil at the moment. So India is our number one export partner. And in terms of imports, India is number two behind China. 20 billion of our imports comes from China, and about 5 billion comes from India. So India is our number two country where we import to, and number one country that we export to. And they're the largest buyer of crude oil. So they're a very important strategic partner. And I think it's important that we develop this relationship, improve the bilateral relationships, and we can begin to see how we can begin to do some currency swaps so that we can ease off the pressure on the dollar because both countries are still going into dollars to get to rupees and naira. And I think that if we can reach some sort of arrangement as we have with the Chinese swaps with the renminbis, As you know, 14% of our foreign reserves are actually in renminbi. I think we need to start looking at how we can work with India closely because they're a very, very important trading partner. Number one, when it comes to exports, and number two, when it comes to imports. So it's a very important meeting. And as you know, there's a big Indian community in Nigeria who have been here for years doing business in manufacturing. So there's a relationship that I think needs to be explored, and we need to take advantage of that given the problems we have in the Nigerian economy.
How much of goodwill would you say the G20 itself is getting around the world and its level of acceptability? In India, for instance, we understand that there was a counter summit. They called it We20 People's Summit, and it was attended by close to 500 participants on the 18th of August. The plan was that it would extend to the meeting proper, but, the government had to intervene. Their position is that the G20 is a neoliberal elite and exclusionary, has an exclusionary nature, claiming that it's not done enough in protecting the environment. Do you agree?
Well, these are global political issues in terms of climate change and however you see that. But the G20 has always been inclusive in terms that they tend to invite leaders from other parts of the world because they also understand that they live in a global economy and are dependent on a lot of all these other economies. So a lot of all these groupings don't really mean too much. They're just talk shops whereby you talk about your policies, you talk about the cooperation, but the most important things are your trade policies and the sort of trade deals you have between your countries. Those are what is more important. So these are just avenues or platforms where you go to negotiate or renegotiate existing trade treaties and to be able to meet and greet and make sure that it creates a platform for global leaders and it makes very good optics. And this is where most of these leaders review their policies, renegotiate their deals. And, most of the African countries also go there and have side meetings with other world leaders they want to see to be able to negotiate what they're interested in. So at the end of the day, it's just a platform for negotiations and it's a profile. And for us, we have a new president. So it's a big time for Nigeria to be able to talk about the new reforms and to be able to introduce what this government wants to do in Nigeria at the global stage and to be able to meet world leaders. And don't forget that this is ahead of the UN, the United Nations General Assembly in New York, which will be starting right after this. So these are also opportunities for global leaders to engage and discuss once a year and meet face to face. So we shouldn't read too much meaning into it.
Like you said, it boils down to what happens back at home. And just recently, the coordinating minister of the economy, Wale Edun, did say that the last time Nigeria's economy was stable was about a decade ago. And is talking about the need for foreign direct investment, even domestic investment by Nigerians as a way in which the private sector can also come on board. The idea for most Nigerians is that this government wants to play down on borrowing. Talk to us about the relevance of all of these meetings, talk shop like you call them. How can this administration approach them differently and get some gains this time that will be felt back at home?
Well, first of all, you have to know your strategy. Like I said, it's important to meet with India because India is our number one export destination and is our number two importing country. So in terms of trade, I think India is very important for us because there is a very strategic trading partner. So we need to be able to develop that relationship. We need to be able to enhance that relationship. And we need to talk to the Indians as to what else they might want to do in terms of foreign direct investments in Nigeria. And it's important we look at that because, as you've said, the debt profile is significant. 96% of the revenues are going towards debt service. But right now, with the subsidy removal, which would save about $10 billion a year, between $10 to $15 billion a year, that begins to bring in some headroom. So the debt service ratio might fall, but we have reached our headroom in terms of borrowing. The illegal ways and means financing is currently at about 30 trillion naira. That issue has not been resolved, and the government needs to deal with that. And then you have another $100 billion to $120 billion in official debt that is still outstanding. So we have significant amounts of debt, and we need to find a way to restructure this debt and put Nigeria on a sustainable basis. So our visits to all these forums are very important, because this is also where you tell the heads of states of all these other countries about your plan and your intentions and how serious you are about foreign direct investments, and whatever incentives that you require from them. You should be able to convince them to be able to drum up support for you and to drum up support to encourage their companies and their businesses to be able to look at Nigeria differently. Because if the United States and the United Kingdom and other Western nations begin to look favorably towards Nigeria and our perception is better, then, you know, we can begin to see activity there. But our two key trading partners are China and India. United States, we're looking at imports of about $4 billion from them, and Europeans maybe another, $5 billion. So it's important that you know who your strategic trading partners are, work with them, and the people who are doing business with you, make sure they continue to do so. And also, it's important to encourage the local investors. There are many people that have factories in Nigeria. You want to make sure they don't shut down their factories, they don't lay off their workers, but you want to encourage them and put incentives in place for the Nigerian manufacturers to begin to expand their factories. And that comes with policy. So what we need to see now is the budget for this new government. And once we see a new budget, we'll probably see a new direction. And then when the IMF comes in the first quarter of next year for their Article 4 report, it is important that that report is positive, so that we can begin to get a better perception of Nigeria, and a credit rating abroad becomes more positive.
We're also looking forward to see the impact of full subsidy removal and all of the money the government has been saving in the past months, how they will impact on the economy in the coming days. Investment banker and economist, CEO, the CFG Advisory, Tiliwa Adebajo. Thank you for talking to us.
Good evening.
That's our program today. You can